Hi, and welcome back, or welcome to the Mindset and Performance Podcast. I'm Dries, a mindset and performance coach. I help athletes and young professionals with their career development. We work on a wide range of areas from training to nutrition, but focus essentially on the mindset, as it is the key to everything else. The whole idea behind this podcast is to deconstruct the habits that led people to their success, to learn from their experience and understand psychology behind their actions and behavior, and of course, to know what kind of mindsets they have. This week's podcast is with Shannon Quirck, also known as Shannon Reporting. She is a television host, announcer, journalist, director, producer, social media manager at the Inertia, and tour coordinator at the WSL Big Wave event. Our conversation is about her passion for surfing and how she is doing all she can to empower driven women in the world of sports and business. She is a true inspiration. I'm sure a lot of you listeners will benefit from this conversation and learn about hard work, determination, Shannon's compassion, and how to dream big. Okay, well, thank you very much for making time for this. It was unreal when you responded positive. I have been following your work for a while and came across some of your interviews and saw you on the screen, all over the place on the internet and outside of the internet. So it was quite nice. Thank you for making time for this.
Thank you. I'm also a big fan of your work. It's been nice to read your articles and post them on the Inertia. I find them quite beneficial, and that's like one of my favorite parts of the job is reading the material that I think I also really benefit from, in addition to our audience, and then sharing it. So it kind of forces me into other realms of health that I wouldn't necessarily explore as well. But I think we have a lot of alignments with headspace and meditation. And I think with my work, I'm dealing with a lot of athletes that I could also work with you. So I feel like this is a good relationship.
Awesome. That's great.
In case I send anyone your way.
That'll be awesome. Yes. How did you start? Who were you when you were a kid, when you were a child? What was your dreams and what did you want to do?
Taking it way back.
All the way back.
Well, I grew up in San Francisco with a mother that was working at Stanford Hospital and a father who was in the tech industry. I was given a lot of opportunity with education. I felt like I wanted to go to school for journalism. It was a passion of mine. I loved photography. I always was very active as a kid. I was playing soccer, surfing, snowboarding, volleyball, like everything I could find. I felt like sports for me were the outlet where I would go for everything from like security to structure, finding mentors outside of my parents. And it was a really amazing place. I'm still great friends with a lot of the women I grew up playing sport with. And I find now in my circle of friends, that's typically the strongest relationships. And I used sports as an outlet. When I pursued the journalism degree, I went to UCLA and I got an internship with Transworld, which was a surf and snowboard magazine and skate. And I became their intern at first and then started traveling with them a bit to different snowboard contests. And I realized that you can take your passion and pursue it and make a living out of it. Sometimes it's not easy, especially in journalism and writing and photography. I feel like a lot of people work for free in this industry. But I was really determined. And when I graduated, I booked a one-way ticket to South America and lived in Argentina working as a snowboard photographer and backcountry guide for 3 years. And I was also a competitive snowboarder. So this was my way to be in the industry and compete when I could, and then still make money outside of the contest if I, didn't win a contest. And I loved it so much. I found I did get a bit of cabin fever in the snow, and I was pursuing winter. I basically had maybe 4 or 5 winters in a row where I was traveling to California to train and going to Mammoth Mountain and then going back to South America and Patagonia. And at one point I decided to go on a surf trip to Brazil. I fell in love with Brazil and moved there for the next 3 years as working as a surf photographer. I started building websites and trying to make surf videos, and a very interesting opportunity opened up to start the Surf Channel television network out of California, and that got me back to the US, and that's also where I met the Nersha and started producing content and reporting with surfing as the main focus. But I found actually a passion for helping the underdogs in this sport. I felt like women were not portrayed how I wish I could have seen them growing up. Like, I really wish I had a female mentor surfing when I was growing up, and I never had. It was just, my dad and my brothers and all the boys, and I was always in like a wetsuit that didn't fit me, and kind of like a surfboard that was not my size or not the right size. Like, it was just, I didn't feel like women had enough exposure, and also just the storytelling was a bit biased, maybe always from a male side. So I felt, especially with magazines, that it was important to start telling the story of female water women, and not just about how beautiful they are, but also like what they're achieving. So that's been motivating me a lot. And now I'm currently the Big Wave Tour coordinator and event organizer. I work with a big team of big wave enthusiasts that are excited off like the adrenaline from coming all over the world to a big wave spot last minute. We just have 3-day notice, so it's a bit hectic. And that's definitely a test for where my headspace is at, and if I'm up for the job. But I think the adrenaline at that point really gets me flowing through everything.
Okay, wow. I get a couple of questions. Why surfing to start with? Why wasn't it something else? I mean, it can sound a little bit of cliche if you tell me, California, of course, it has to be surfing, but not necessarily, right?
No, I grew up in San Francisco, and I spent a lot of time in Santa Cruz. I lived in the mountains in between the two, and I actually thought surfing was really cold and miserable when I was growing up. I felt like I was always in pain, like it was just so cold. I probably didn't have the right wetsuit. And I liked snowboarding more. I don't know why, but there was something, I think it wasn't until I moved to Southern California that I really fell more in love with surfing. It's much easier, when you could not use a wetsuit or just less rubber. But I find surfing to be have a longer lifespan. Like, I feel like with snowboarding, I was getting really injured. I was competing in half pipe and border cross and giant slalom, and I was going really fast on really icy conditions a lot of the times, and competing pushes you to another level. I think I was really headstrong. I wanted to be like an Olympic athlete, and I was just so driven to learn new tricks. And at one point I was in the hospital so often, my mom was like, "Man, why are you doing this to yourself? Like, so many broken bones and knee surgeries, and just it got to a point where I felt like surfing, I still have that adrenaline. I'm definitely an adrenaline junkie, and I'm trying to find other ways to use that in a healthy transformation. That's not just putting my life at risk in a half pipe. But I feel so much love for these sports that I don't think about the consequences as often as I should, or over time as I grow up, I kind of think about it more because I could feel my old injuries coming back. But surfing, I do feel like is a good crossover from snowboarding, and I love the fact that you can find anything in surfing. You can go out for a chill day and just relax and be in a meditative state with the ocean, or you can paddle out in Puerto Escondido when it's pumping, and you definitely feel alive. I mean, it can be any spectrum of like whatever you're looking for, really. And I find that, with the recent addition with the wave pool and all of these things that are happening in surfing, it's losing that aspect of it that I love so much. That's really just like being out in nature. I find it very healthy. And I also think it's very humbling. I think the bigger waves you surf, the more humbled you are by the ocean, and the more you feel like a part of something much bigger.
Oh yeah, especially the big ones, for sure. Did you look up to someone? When was the first time you started? Like, was it with the parents or by yourself? You just took a board and went to the water?
My dad took me out. He
How
he
old
brought
were you?
me. I was probably 4 or 5 when I first started, but I started on a boogie board, actually, a bodyboard, just when I was 4 or 5, and then I think I started surfing like around that age as well. First, we took a lot of trips to Hawaii, and then he moved to Kauai, my dad, and I was going to school in California, so I'd go out there as much as I could, and then it was just like I was so hooked. I just wanted to constantly be in Hawaiian Islands, and not only to see my father, but to be in the ocean there, and it's just so alive, and the reef's amazing, and there's obviously a ton of sharks and other things and reef cuts, but I just loved it, and I think coming out of the water with salty skin and hair, and I just feel so much better than I do walking in. That I find it. I surf as much as I can. I try to go out every day, but like you said, the warm water definitely has, I think, even more benefits.
And you mentioned looking up to parents, like mentors. I think you used the word mentor. Was your father or mother or both of them some sort of mentors for you? Or did you look up to someone, perhaps it was a woman, perhaps it was a man, from the time you started?
Definitely. My dad was a big influence on me. He was a swimmer in college and a rugby player and very athletic. He got me swimming at a really early age, and I think that was that's a huge part of why I surf and why I was able to surf Ocean Beach at all as a kid, because it's a really strong current and you can get sucked out to sea. There's giant great white sharks. It's not a friendly place. I didn't even find it fun, actually. I kind of thought it was like my swimming classes, where I was just like you just kind of swim towards the black line and hope that eventually get out to the lineup, but sometimes it doesn't work out, So,
I made it all the way to the sand. I never put my feet in the water when I was there.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the friendliest place, but it builds really great athletes and great swimmers that are ready for, beach break conditions. But other than my dad, I think all my coaches through sport were huge influence on me. Those are and they were mostly women. I played soccer at UCLA, and we had a Turkish coach. But they all just pushed me outside of the classroom, which I felt like was really important. I was always able to get whatever I was dealing with kind of off on the field or in the water. Like I was definitely using sport to balance myself out. I had a pretty difficult time with my parents getting divorced when I was 12. And at that point, I just became religiously going to soccer every day after school. I would go snowboarding like 3 or 4 times a week up to Lake Tahoe. And once I was in college, I scheduled my classes around the storms. So I would probably have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday class, pack them full days of school, and then go straight up to the mountains for the next 4 days. And it's definitely a huge part of my life. I think the mentors and the coaching were just pushing me harder and making me believe in myself. And they were giving I had really great coaches that it was more positive reinforcement. Occasionally when we lost a game or something, it was really hard to see the face of my coach, because, as long as they weren't taking it personally.
Is there any words that you can remember that one of them was saying to you that you still use right now in your career or in your on daily basis? Some mantra, for example.
I think just working hard. I realized that a lot of professional athletes are at the top of their game because they work so hard and train so much in that particular field. It often kind of comes around in another form of making parts of your life unbalanced. And I find that a lot now with chasing big swell. I'll do anything for a big swell, to the point where I'm leaving loved ones behind, or responsibilities, or canceling on things last minute. It's really frustrating. And that's one of the hardest parts about chasing storms. But if you work hard and practice, I think you can really just conquer anything in life, or any obstacle or challenge. Sometimes it's really frustrating, but whatever you put your time into, you become better at. And I think that's the most important way to look at your day when you start out. Like, how are you going to spend your time? Like, I know a lot of people are focused around making money and getting good grades and all of that, but really, how are you going to spend that time? You're going to sit in front of your computer for 8 hours. Like, is that healthy? I think I think about that a lot now. What I'm doing with my time. I've had the opportunity to be an entrepreneur and not work in a 9-to-5. Even with inertia, I've been, traveling quite a lot, and it's not always easy, like the time zones. But I do find it's necessary for me to be able to have some freedom to focus on myself and work on things that are important to me, and not just the daily grind of plugging numbers or whatever it is that someone with a 9-to-5 collar job would do. I find it completely debilitating with my creativity. And that's like fundamental for me when in my headspace, going into work or writing an article or reporting, is I need to be clear-headed and focused and motivated and creatively inspired.
And you can still have that while sustaining this kind of lifestyle where you're actually traveling a lot. How often do you travel, like per month or per year?
It's like kind of more of a question, like, how often do I not travel?
Yeah.
We had, for a while, we only had, I guess it was 2 months off on the Big Wave Tour. But now we actually combined all of the events just for the Northern Hemisphere winter, which is unfortunate because we lost a lot of amazing spots like Punta de Lobos in Chile and Pico Alto in Peru and Dungeons in South Africa. But now this year is going to be the first time I'm focused more on the winter, and I do work a lot of contests in Puerto. So I spend about 4 or 5 months in Mexico, which feels like a bit of stability for me when I'm in a place for a while and I can start to call it home, even if I'm not a local. You kind of have to make yourself a home in these places. And with the Big Wave Tour, since it's such few events, I've made sure to find myself a community where I feel comfortable. And like here in Portugal, I come to the same town, and I'm living just south of Nazaré. For the last 3 years, I come here for about 4 months. And then I spend some other time in Hawaii, and I call Oahu on the North Shore has technically been my home for the last 5 years, but I spend only a couple months a year there.
And so what are the mental skills that someone needs to sustain a lifestyle like the one you have? I mean, you mentioned like you need to be focused to be able to write and rested and so on, but could you list a couple of mental skills that you think you're good at having?
Sure. I think being independent is the first and foremost. Like, in order to do any of this, you have to be willing to accept change, which is not always easy. I think very in tune with the weather, and storm tracking is a huge part of it, so that I can gauge a little bit what my day will be like. If I know, like today I'm in Portugal and the winds are terrible, I know that I'll be able to edit today and get some writing done. And then tomorrow Nazaré might be 10 or 11 meters. So I'm probably going to have to balance out my work schedule.
So being flexible and adaptable.
Sure. Which is not easy. And I think I struggle the most with other people's responses to my unaccountability at times, where I bail last minute, or even a dentist appointment I bail on, and then they're like, what happened? It's just the story of my life. And I think the
And how did you learn that?
commitments
Was
are
it
important. You know?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead first with commitment.
Commitments. I mean, that's my weakness. You know, is I'm committed to the tour. I'm very committed to the sport, and promoting surfing, women's surfing, big wave surfing. I do feel like commitments, like in relationships, are really, really hard. The work-life balance is the hardest thing for me at this point. With family, friends, loved ones, I want my family to be the priority, but I do find at times that I have to bail for work, and I guess everyone struggles with this.
I guess you sacrifice a lot for what is the priority right now for you.
Correct. And I think my father instilled in me that that drive to have a career. Like I was lucky. I grew up in a very progressive home with parents that felt like me and my brothers, like that. I felt very, very equal to my brothers. I didn't feel like I was pushed more to do some girly things, or I was an athlete and they accepted that and they pushed me to do it, and were accepting of my dreams. And I think I always wanted a career, and I wasn't motivated to marry young or marry rich or any of these things that I think a lot of women get pretty lost in. I wanted to have an independent life, and so that's been, I think, helping me in this stage. But yeah, I think the job does require a lot of time to think. Like you definitely need to realize that you're in this for a bigger cause, and at times it can be so frustrating. Like if you drive all the way to Swell, or fly across the world, and drop and bail on all your previous commitments, and then you get there and the swell's terrible and the conditions are wrong, and I've been in only a few situations like that, luckily, but it's very confusing at that point. Like, why am I here? What am I doing? We just spent all this money to come out here, and it's a big loss and frustrating. And then there's the other times where, like the women paddle out at Jaws for the first time, and I felt like my entire career was coming to a head at that point, where I felt like finally I could feel the fruits of my labor, which is, it was meaningful. And I think in Puerto Escondido, I had a pivotal moment this season where I saw little girls on the beach, like cheering up this Mexican woman who had gotten the best wave of the whole contest, like man or woman. She scored like a 9.5 on a huge barrel, and she got spit out and the whole crowd went wild. And I was like watching for the first time in Latin America that a woman had been crowned a champion in a big wave contest. It was a dream come true for me. And I think there's moments like that where I realize, like, all the sacrifice I'm making there is a reason. And I really want to set a path and open up doors for big wave surfers, but also just for women that are challenged by something and they want to be inspired and realize that they too can like pursue their dream. And even if their odds are totally terrible and they're outnumbered, and like in many sports where women are, there aren't more women on the field, it's hard to hear no a lot of times, and it's hard to people tell you can't do something. It's frustrating, but it almost pushes you more to prove them wrong, to prove it to yourself.
I see a lot of parallels with what you do as a reporter and the life of an athlete when it comes to dealing with frustrations and staying focused and prioritizing some things instead of other things and having that work-life balance. Did you learn that from your athletic career?
I think probably UCLA was a good place for me to be, to understand how to multitask to the best of my ability. I went to a really great school, a great high school, in Palo Alto that I had so many classes. I had so many extracurricular activities and things to do after school, and just it was I look back now and I feel like, wow, I have so much free time now compared to what I did as a child.
So how do you manage your time usually? Like, what is it? How do you start your day and how do you end it?
Well, thanks to doing a bit more research on health, I've changed a lot of my practices in the daily routine. I think when I first started working at the Surf Channel, I was so obsessed with making the channel a success. I would wake up to sending emails, and I don't do that anymore. Thankfully, I found like meditation and breathing exercises to be really vital for me, and yoga as cross training, but also more for my mental stability, just to be in the right headspace and be as positive as I can. So I usually will combine like a surf check with a yoga practice, where I walk out to the beach, check the waves, do some breathing and yoga. If the waves are really good, I usually cut it pretty short and head back to get my board. But I try to be active in the morning before I start thinking about work. And I'm in an industry, especially with social media, that does not sleep. Like I, for years, worked with inertia without taking a day off, not necessarily because, like, I could have asked for a day off, but I think I put a lot of pressure on myself to do a good job and hustle, and I'm
Deliver.
not sure. Yeah, totally. And so with social media, it's I'm constantly getting blown up on direct messages with people that are like excited about sharing their trailer or their film project and this clip. And so now I'm using the time a bit wiser to say, okay, there's only so many hours a day. Like, how am I going to use this to the best of my ability to be effective and also like good to myself, and not just trying to help others. I really find a lot of pleasure in helping and serving other people. And
I was just going to ask you what drives you.
Yeah.
Actually, I was just going to ask you what drives you specifically, and the type of job that you're doing. Why are you doing it? What are you after? I know that's
question.
the deep question. Yeah, right. Like you mentioned a couple of things, like it brings you some sort of freedom, flexibility, creativity, because every time things are different and you just have to come up with new ways or being creative about how you report and how you write. But if you want to look a little bit deeper, even like what is it that you're after when from this whole lifestyle?
I think one word would probably be empowerment.
Empowerment.
I find it very inspiring to watch other women that I know personally and also know as like human beings. Like some of them do seem like superhuman when you're coming down a 40-foot wave at Jaws. I find like Paige Alms to be completely in her own field when it comes to women surfing. She is like on another playing field completely. And when I get to know these athletes, you realize like they're also human. They also make mistakes. Maybe Paige doesn't make that many mistakes, but she definitely is. She works hard. She works so hard, and that's someone I could say is a reliable, good friend who, even though she's like, storm chasing and hyper focused in her field, she still has like many different talents, many different interests. I like to, when I'm doing a report or like a feature on an athlete, I like to humanize them to be that girl next door that you can relate to in some way. Like whether it's because they also like gardening, or, here's her training at the gym, or whatever it is that makes her feel a little bit more on the ground versus that athlete that's like dominating the big wave tour. It makes you feel inspired, like, oh wow, if I train and go to the gym, I can actually do this myself. And if I am focused and passionate like she is, then so I find I put that kind of love and passion into the journalism, probably because I want to help these athletes reach their top potential. I want to open doors. I want them to have sponsorship if that's what they're after. If they have such inspiring stories. I think there's a lot of different stories that haven't been told in the surf space, mostly because it's been male dominated, and the idea of bringing a female protagonist into a feature surf film is a new concept. There's been, now I think more than ever, a lot more people behind the scenes that are women trying to get, whether it's writing or directing, just in Hollywood in general, it's been such a few amount of women that take those roles. And I think now, as so many doors are opening and now we have equal prize money, that is completely like a 0 to 100 that we've had in the last few years, where we went from no big wave events for women to one event in Oregon. And then now we have Jaws, Mavericks, Todos Santos, Puerto Escondido, and I'm pushing for Nazare for the women as well, which is a big part of why I'm here.
I'm sure they are inspiring you as well to keep on doing what you do and keep on following, working hard. I think you're a hard worker as well, right? Like, by that also you become the inspiration yourself to your own audience for what you do. Defending, empowering women, being empowered yourself. Correct? Yeah?
Thank you. I hope so.
So, how satisfied are you from your career today as a reporter, and to where you reach? Like, if you're gonna put a number on it, from 1 to 10, 10 being super satisfied, where would you stand on that scale?
I think man, there's always stuff I want to still accomplish, but
would that be a 7? 8?
But at the same time, I really have the dream. Like, I need to dream bigger at this point, because what I was dreaming of, having women with equal prize money, I didn't think I would see in my career, and it just happened. And so now I'm like, okay, well, and the women are out now on the tour. At one point I was thinking of creating a women's big wave tour, because it was so hard to get the men to understand that, like, we were ready for this. And even though it's dangerous, like, we're ready, and there are women that want to do it. And now that they're accepted and included, it's very interesting. I feel like I need to almost like go after other sports like skateboarding, or open the doors to other avenues of the work where I could do this in
what would you call that chapter?
Way.
The next chapter. What would you name it? Can you formulate your dream?
Yeah, I mean, I need to, I think, take a pen to paper and dive into some other goals. I do this often, like, around New Year's. I think a lot of people do their resolutions, and I think about where I want it to be or what I want to do.
One way that I use usually with my clients to help them just have a little more clarity around that. Like, so I start asking them the question, like, so where are they in that scale from 1 to 10 level of satisfaction? They would say, for example, let's say, I don't know, I'm a 7 or an 8. Then I'll ask them, how would a 9 look like? So just look like, so not thinking about or articulating, just pure daydreaming. Where would I be? Who I would be seeing? What I would be looking at? With whom I would be talking? Build that image from there. And then the next question would be, so what stops you from getting there? And then you'll be looking at, then you'll be identifying the things that you need to start doing in order for you to get to that 9 and be even more satisfied, or just jump to the next chapter.
Yeah, I feel actually quite satisfied with work. I think the amount of energy I put into work definitely exceeds the amount I'm putting into, day-to-day family life and hanging with friends. I think I more want to, like, balance the scales and maybe take a step back sometimes from the career, if anything. Not that I want to retire now, I'm 30, but I'm like, I would love to balance it more. I think I've spent so much time chasing the career path and these goals of empowering women surfing and progressing the sport, that I now feel like I also need to take a step back and think, like, in Nazare, I'm challenging myself to also surf the wave and toe surf the wave. And so I do my own training where I'm thinking as, as an athlete would, of what I'm eating, what I'm doing day to day. If I went for a run today, like thinking a lot about my own surfing versus just storytelling about other people's paths. And that brings me back to the inspiration, and like, it makes me realize like why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it is so challenging. And I think I have even more respect for all the athletes out there when I'm working with the jet ski drivers and I'm working to, train on a jet ski. And I understand how hard it is, and especially like a place like Nazare that pushes you to a whole other level of difficulty and challenge. And any other experience going into Nazare is kind of like, it all leads up. I feel like Nazare is really a pivotal spot where it will get the biggest and most challenging it can ever get in surfing, or one of the hardest spots. And so everything around it, from the jet ski driving to the rescues to just filming with like all the water that it brings up on your lens and your camera. I mean, there's so many challenges that it makes me feel incredibly empowered. When I leave Nazare, I feel like I could surf anywhere and like conquer the world. And
You're
it like gives
definitely
me a whole
driven by
other
challenge, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That's for sure. I get really bored when I am in a place that's too comforting, like too familiar. Every time I go back to California now, I get like itchy and start to be like, okay, well, where's the next trip? Because I speak the language here and I already know the beaches, and I kind of like, it's a trap. It's a mental trap. I know there's a ton. It's a huge state. I could easily like travel to do Yellowstone or places I've never been to in the US, but I feel like when I'm abroad and in, working with another language, I definitely have like another part of my brain fired up, and things are so different. And there's every day I'm like constantly challenged and in uncomfortable situations. And for some reason, stepping outside my comfort zone is like where I always want to be. And then I go home to mom every once in a while. So,
so what do you do when you are not traveling around? When you don't have, does it even happen like to don't have anything to do? Like let's say not traveling, like home, California, or somewhere off season somewhere, or waiting period. What do you like doing?
Yeah, sure. Like, so once March comes around, March 31st, I have a one month off, which is so the month of April last year, I went to Uruguay. I wanted to just go to a new country that had nothing to do with big wave surfing, and kind of like a place I wouldn't normally get a job in, or get flown to for work. And that was an amazing experience, but there are times when I will step away from surfing so that I can really appreciate it. I'm very, very spoiled by good waves at this point. Like like here in Portugal, especially when the water's cold, I get pretty spoiled and won't go out unless it's like firing and like sunny and just good. So sometimes I try to pursue other things. Like right now I'm actually thinking of doing yoga teacher training just to get much better at my own yoga practice. And also I've been teaching like yoga for surfers in Nazare and also in Mexico, and I want to just be better at all the poses and making sure I'm not causing any injuries, obviously. And I think that's probably the next time I get a month off, that's probably what I'll be doing, whether it's in
30
India
days.
or Thailand.
It's actually 30.
Something.
It's exactly specifically 30 days of training, I think, at least, right?
Yeah, like 200 hours.
Yeah.
And I find it really, really beneficial, especially as a cross training. And I think your breath and your lung capacity, but also just the ability to stay calm in really uncomfortable situations is life or death in big wave surfing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not at the point where I'm not paddling up to Mavericks. I'm not surfing Jaws. I think it's a goal of mine eventually, but it's definitely, I take baby steps with surfing. I want to be ready and in the right mental space. As much as I like to be out of my comfort zone, I wouldn't paddle out if I didn't feel right about it. I like to trust my instincts, and
I'd be curious to know, how do you train for Nazare? What do you do? Like, how much time you dedicate for that?
Last season I was really, really dedicated because at that point I was waiting maybe 3 months for the contest, and we had like almost the entire season had gone by and we hadn't run it yet. So I got a lot more time in Nazare than ever before. And I was training with the world champion bodyboarder there, Antonio Cardoso, who we switched up a lot. So one day, say we would run through the sand dunes. Then maybe a few hours in the gym. I started light weightlifting, which I'd never done before because I felt like as a woman surfer, you already have like big muscles on your arms. Like I didn't want to necessarily build muscle for aesthetic appeal. It was just, I realized that there were so many muscles in my back that I hadn't been using in surfing that you do use with toe surfing. When you're holding the rope and you need to keep your elbows locked into your hips to not throw your shoulders out or get lashed around. The jet ski is like moving pretty fast, so you need to really be on point. And also there's so much adrenaline that you almost don't feel injuries. Like you might not feel something that's injured during a session there because it's so overwhelming sometimes that I spent a lot more time in the gym. I was actually living in the training facility for a month. And that was like a very, very serious, like wake up, run down to check the waves, come back, go to the gym. If the waves weren't that great. And then we would go to the Olympic pool, do apnea training. I love apnea training. I find it it's amazing. I think free diving as well for me are just a few other places where if surfing wasn't in my life, like I would focus more time in. I think they're, especially on the North Shore, like during the summer, free diving is the best option, I think.
Wow, you're going for the whole thing, actually, training all aspects: fitness, surf itself, on land training, land-based, all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of balance training. I find like even with yoga, like one leg standing poses will be super fundamental for my knees, which is usually the most common injury for women. For a serious injury in sport is the knee, the MCL or ACL, which I've already had surgery on and learned the hard way. And then where you are mentally, which is why I think it's important for me to surround myself with positivity and like people that are also inspiring me or keeping me up. Like in Nazare, I was talking to Andrew Cotton, who had a very serious injury and probably the worst wipeout of the year last year, and broke his back. He was in an interesting headspace going, through the season where he was in Nazare, still watching the swell, couldn't surf. But he was telling me that it was important for him to be around people that were filling his bucket and not dipping from the bucket. So maybe someone that was kind of telling you, no, you can't do this, or like negativity on like, why are you doing this? Why are you living your life this way? Instead of someone that's lifting you up and saying, but you can do that if you work hard, or you're a great person, or you're totally like so close, like just, let's go train again tomorrow. Things that are people that really lift you up. It's important to notice when someone's not doing that, I think, and to just like to detach yourself and not necessarily cut them out of your life, but just recognizing it. And I want to be that person for others as well. Like I want to tell people that they can do what they dream and open those doors instead of shutting them and being like, oh no, like you're a girl, like you shouldn't, you can't surf like those guys, you shouldn't paddle out. Like I'm always trying to push the women and the men too.
Did you hear that a lot when you were younger for yourself?
Yeah, my parents told me I could do anything I dreamed, and I think they were, when I told them I wanted to be a photojournalist or journalist. I think they were excited because they knew I was writing a lot. I was like writing poetry. I loved writing and reading, and I think they saw that lining up for me, but they also knew it might not be the most well-paying job. And I never really considered that. I was never driven by money. I was more, I guess those big picture goals were more important. And that I was doing work that was meaningful, especially at the NERSHA, when you see like how much published work there is every day.
Huge.
There's so much content, but there are specific articles that I feel like make a huge impact, especially when it comes to health or environmental causes or philanthropy or something that's the point is not just ego driven. Here's a video of me getting barreled and I want everyone to see it so that I can make my sponsors happy. Like that is the last thing I want to do anymore. Like I know that that's mostly what surfing is selfies, getting barreled or here's me getting another wave. And I just am not inspired by that. Like I feel that ego is a really big part of sport. At some point, I think you have to distinguish confidence via ego, why you're doing something, especially when it's life. You're risking your life to do it, like a big wave. Where if you just paddle out because you want to get a clip, you might get absolutely destroyed. And I think it's all about headspace and like good intention and
yeah, I see. So that's why it's important to know the why, right? Like why doing what you do, why you after what you're after, right? I wanted to go back to being positive and the advice of that surfer. I can't quote you exactly how you said it or how he said it, but are you an optimist? Would you consider yourself an optimist?
I believe I'm an optimist. At the same time, especially playing the Big Wave Tour, I always factor in the worst case scenario. Like I don't necessarily like that I do that because it's stressful, and I don't want to worry. I'm aware that worrying, it does not help anything. But at the same time, I'm also thinking of the safety of these athletes. Like I'm usually taking them to the hospital if something happens, or with their families, bringing them to the hospital, or just like dealing with getting everyone home safe after the contest. And that part is very personal to me, where I want everyone to go home safe, or at least like I just find it to be
So what do you do when you do have this worries, these concerns? It's obviously like some sort of negative self-talk. What if this happened? So how do you counter it? What do you do about it?
Well, I think with the tour specifically, like we plan for the worst and set everything in motion so that the top medical directors are there, the helicopter is on call, an ambulance is waiting, everything is in place for the worst case scenario. We train to rescue people that are unconscious. Like I feel like everyone that surfs, including the beginner who's just going out for the first time, if you're in the ocean, you should know CPR. You should know how to save someone, a stranger who you might walk up onto the beach and someone is with their head down facing the water. That is, I think, the best way for me to know that everything is going to be okay is when I'm with people that are trained in life-saving skills, And I think CPR is like the one that's super basic that everyone needs to know. I mean, not just surfers, everyone does. And so sure. That helps me when I see one of the Big Wave Tour athletes in the water, like say on a free surf day, I already know everything's going to be fine. Like I feel very optimistic, I guess, about the session and just that everything's going to go as well as possible. If there's for some reason, and then, you know, that the negative part comes in and you're like, okay, well, if something terrible happens, like at least we have the best trained people for this job and to save the life. And then I'm noticing more now, I think with meditation, especially, and even your dreams, like my dreams, when I wake up in the morning, it kind of tells me where my headspace is at almost. Like last night I had this dream about, I was in an avocado field, like an avocado farm, and it's my favorite food is avocado. So
love avocados too.
I woke up and I was just like, wow, this is a really good dream. I felt really great. And I was like, great, awesome. But if I'm the night before a swell, I don't sleep much before a big contest. Or if I do, it is the worries set in. I start worrying. I start thinking, but the alternate, if they don't show up, or this person's on this flight, but they might miss the connection. If they miss the connection, I need to plan. I forgot to go down the list of things I had to do. And the responsibilities before the tour runs an event the list is so long that my headspace is like all over the board. And at one point, and the veterans on tour, like Gary Linden, who started the tour, he is really good at settling me down and just being like, Shannon, you did everything you could do. It's 11 o'clock at night. We have to be up at 5 a.m. We're going to go to sleep. And he's like the one that's reminding me to like drink water and eat lunch. And I get so motivated during those points that I'll forget the little things that really are going to take care of myself in order to get through the job. And so, yeah, just kind of finding my breath and being grateful for the moment, getting back into the present and not just planning for tomorrow's event is really important. I think right after the event is where I'm able to like finally celebrate, and actually celebrating the contest once it's run is a huge part of me getting back to the excited and elated Shannon. Is like, we just finished the event, no matter what happened, no matter all the road bumps and things that we have to learn from for the next one to be better. I also always try to detach myself from the work and not take anything personally and just be like, so grateful the fact that it even run. It's a miracle when these big wave contests happen. Like, so many things have to align that you really do need to, like, at one point either pat yourself on the back or go for a surf yourself and just celebrate. And yeah, I try to take a few days off each event afterwards just to realize like what we're doing is impactful, and it's really difficult work. And so just celebrating, like, yeah, either having a beer with your coworkers or going down to the point breaks. And actually I usually turn my phone off for 2 or 3 days if I can.
Wow. I get my hair standing from hearing you describing the whole environment and the big waves and the energy over there. I've never been to one of these big events. I've been watching big waves here in Bali, Indonesia, and particularly the 25th of July, last July 25th, there was a big, huge swell that hit the shore. I think one of the biggest in the last 10, 15 years. Oh, and yeah. You feel the energy. I can just imagine what you'll be feeling and seeing all these sceneries and all these surfers and being in that energy on this tour. But what made you choose the big wave surf tour instead of regular surf tours?
I've worked a lot of the CT contests, and I still work the QS contests when I can. But during the big wave season, I find it like you always want to surround yourself with people that are better at something than you. I find it when I'm around the big wave athletes, I learn so much from them. I'm like constantly taking notes on their equipment and what they're doing to train and how long they can hold their breath and all this stuff that really motivates me to be a better surfer and like just focus more on my athleticism and my health. And so the big waves are, man, I think growing up in Northern California, it's all about Mavericks. It's all about who's surfing Mavericks, what it's like out there. It feels like a phenomenon. It doesn't break that often. So when it does, it's like now it gets really crowded, but I've always held it at the pinnacle of surfing. Like I find that the best and most professional athletes are at that level where they're surfing Mavericks or surfing Jaws. They're going off, they're the Greg Long, of which there's only one Greg Long, but that for me is like, it's where every big wave surfer wants to be. Like with the knowledge he has he has such patience for these waves. He has so many, there's so many things going on in his life outside of surfing that you can see when he's in the water. Like the way he waits for the biggest wave. In order to have that kind of patience, like you need to be really headstrong.
You learn a lot from them. You learn a lot during that tour.
Yeah, totally. And I think the WSL as well, coming on to support the Big Wave Tour has been a great change as well, because they're so professional with the broadcast. It's a $500,000 broadcast. There's people from the NFL and UFC and all of these huge mainstream sports who have tons of experience behind the camera and with the direction and production that pushes me. I want to be surrounded with people that are at the top of the field and constantly learning and getting better at what I'm doing. And so that's really inspiring. And I think the big wave factor keeps it incredibly exciting. Like that, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's also the huge benefit of being at those spots after the contest when there's still going to be swell, so you can go surfing. And that's not something you always get at the QS events. A lot of them are running like really small waves and they have set dates, whereas the Big Wave Tour, we have the entire winter to just run one day when it's potentially the best day. And I always gather tons of free surf footage before and after, and then I'm in the water. So it feels really rewarding. And it's a small community. I think within surfing's already a small community, but when you niche it down to big wave surfing, I'm pretty much with these athletes traveling around the world, like as a family, and with, their kids or wives or when it comes to the girls, like the women that are invited to the Big Wave Tour events are like some of my best friends that I am so, we do so much traveling that you have to make your friends your family at some point, so
yeah.
We spend Christmas together sometimes. And yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why it's like, I also have to draw that line where I'm working at the contest and I'm not the mom either, even though sometimes I feel like I'm the surf mom who has to make sure everyone gets home safe and has like a ride to the athlete event and knows what time the meetings are at and all that stuff. I also have to detach and know that I'm not responsible for what happens. I'm not responsible for who wins or if someone gets hurt. I'm at this point, hosting them and making sure that it goes as smooth as possible, that they feel comfortable, that we're all in this together. And also I think, I'm, not a psychologist at all, but I find that I'm in the position where a lot of athletes, if they do have a head injury or something serious, like we want to make sure that they have good medical care. And I find myself in the position where sometimes they're just like happy to see a familiar face, and
being
especially
there for them.
Like
support.
Yeah. And I'm not a mom, but I think I put a lot of time and energy into just taking care of the people that we're working with and the athletes that come out for the contest. And I do find like I'm loving these people, as a mom might her kids or something. I feel like a level of responsibility at times, that everything goes well. But again, like just detaching myself from that is important, and recognizing that, even though I'm friends with an athlete, and this has happened a few times where a good friend is put in the hospital and I get emotional and it becomes very personal. Or like one of my roommates was injured in Puerto and put in an ambulance on a stretcher, and they thought she had broken her femur, and I was just like felt completely responsible for helping organize the event and maybe putting my friend through the most pain she'd ever been in. And then turns out she was fine. It was a sprained ankle. Everything was fine, but I was like an emotional wreck, you know? So,
Yeah.
and I was live on television. So it's like things like that. There's so much happening in a short amount of time that, I need to walk into it as stable as possible. Like, I think I also finding a way to sleep well before an event would be amazing. It's not something that I can do very well, but
I was just gonna ask you, how do you recharge? You know, you're going through a lot. Being there, present, focused, talking to people, also dealing with the emotional stuff, with whether the big waves or the people that you care for.
Yeah, afterwards, I try to turn my phone off and just completely leave the bubble of wherever we are. So like in Puerto, I went down to the point breaks. You have no service. You're in a completely different environment. It's not life-threatening. It's like a nice little point break. And that's really good. I think also, like, I recognize now how much time I'm on my phone with social media. And when I don't have the phone or I don't have service, I start to panic, and I realize that it's because I'm completely dependent on my phone in order to work. And that part of life, which is, you know, not something I was dealing with my whole life. Like, luckily I had a childhood without a cell phone, but I which won't be the case soon for most kids, but
for sure, there's just a new movie about that. Actually, I can't remember the title.
Yeah, and I definitely noticed the strain on my eyes and the pressure I put on myself versus just being able to go with the flow when my phone's off. And so I try to do that. Like after Mavericks, I'll like go up to my grandma's house in Big Sur and just hang out with her and like either turn my phone off or just focus on family or something else that's, you know, also important to me. And but yeah, the night after the contest or the night of the contest, when it's wrapped up, is like just a big party celebration. I feel like I don't go out too much nowadays. But after the contest is like when I give myself that okay to celebrate. Like I remember even Kai Lenny, who's, you know, the top of his game, when he won Puerto, he's such a focused athlete. The kid has, you know, he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke. He's like very, very focused and dedicated to training. And I remember him, he was obviously happy. He was like elated that he won the contest, but you could tell like he was getting ready to go to bed early so he could start training the next day for the next contest. And I just at one point pulled him aside and I was like, you're going to have a margarita right now and we're going to celebrate. He's like, I never had a margarita. And I kind of was like, you know, I wasn't trying to force feed him the drink, but I just wanted him to realize that it's okay to celebrate the win. And
very important message here.
Yeah. Even if tomorrow you sleep in, like he puts a lot of pressure on himself as well to be the best. He wants the world title. And when you're that close, like he was at Nazarea, he got second. He was that close to a world title. He adds up all of those, you know, sleeping in the morning is not something that Kai Lenny will do. So I just felt like from one workaholic to another, I was trying to explain to him, like, it's okay. Like we all are gonna just hang out by the pool and do nothing tomorrow. So that's, but yeah, but that's what I was saying about these athletes. Like they're at the top of their game because of that dedication. Most of them, not all of them, but most of them are training at a whole other level, with such different things in cross training and apnea and biking and whatever else, that taking a day off sounds like, just doesn't even sound fun, you know?
Okay. A couple more questions. Do you read?
I do read. I've been getting back into book mode because I find I read so many articles on the inertia and sometimes I'm posting 10 times a day, different articles. And that's the majority of my reading now is online. But then
What do you specifically read?
I mix it in between, like obviously the surf media and what's going on in the surf world. But I don't find it as compelling as the imagery. Like I definitely find imagery to be more impactful, especially with social media. So when it is reading, it's usually health related. I read books from like different yogis and people that I think like self-help category really when it comes. I want to be effective and how I spend my time. And so I think like we were talking about negative self-talk, that's been a big part of something I wanted to change this year was if I fail at something, not telling myself that I suck at this thing and not beating myself up about it. I'm very critical of myself already. So when I hear other criticism, I kind of spin out a bit. So taking that and transforming it into something that I can use a little bit better is really important. I think there's big spikes of dopamine with these big wave events where you get a green light. Like if you get a green light, and I know I have 3 days to get to the contest and like be working. I have so much adrenaline that coming down from that afterwards is like a lot of athletes I think will call it depression. At least I'm in a bit of a different scenario because I'm like I go to the event and I'm working whatever happens, like I'm still working and leaving. I'm not depending on winning the contest. So I think there's a little difference there. Like every time we get at an event, I feel like I'm winning. But working on my on positivity, I think is like I find a lot of different reads for that, and even it could even be poetry or I read a lot in Spanish and Portuguese, which is really important for me too. Like say I'm in Mexico, I try to always read Portuguese books so that I'm using the language, because when I jump back to Portugal, now I'm reading books in Spanish here because I want to make sure I don't lose the language. And I have friends from all over the place, and even within the big wave surfing, we have a lot of different international athletes, so I'm pretty much using these languages constantly. But just being mindful of that is important to me. I also write poetry. I love expressing myself through written word, and there's tons of things that I write for myself and will never publish that I find it therapeutic. I think it's really important to express myself and my thoughts with actually a pen and paper. I don't even write on the computer much if it's not for a published work. It's usually pen to paper, and I'll use like gratitude lists as well almost every day as like a mindful practice to realize, like, no matter, instead of just focusing on something that's not working and getting tripped up on it, I recognize the thought, and then I'll move on to being like, okay, well, what is going on really well? What am I grateful for? Everything from, my health to family to the career and whatever else is in between, and like getting back to the details, and just being like grateful for waking up to like the sun, like things that like just getting really back into the present moment. I use literature for that. Like I haven't been escaping much with fictional stories, but I think that would probably be good for me, especially before bed. Yeah, I'm pretty hard on the like I feel like when I'm awake, I want to be like I don't know. I guess it
Productive.
exactly. It's definitely an American thing. Like the productivity, being like hard on myself to constantly hustle is like a very, very American thing, characteristic I do have, which is like definitely instilled by my father. And I, bless his heart, like I think it's great. I also see, like I was saying, I'd love to take a step back and not actually work so much at some point.
I don't know if I mentioned the other day, but one of my clients really look up to you. And she would like to know, what does it take to do what you do? How can you answer this question by being very specific and as concise as possible?
Use your voice. I think using your platform and your voice, expressing yourself is really important. I think there's a lot of people that will listen, and I think being authentic to your ideals and your beliefs is really important. If I was frustrated every time I heard someone say the girls can't surf here, I really wouldn't be in this work anymore. I would have quit so long ago. I've had so many moments where I think that if I was just thinking with my brain, I probably would have quit because the odds were so bad. Like that was where I was with Puerto Escondido. Every time I asked for a women's contest, it was like, you're joking. The girls don't even surf Cicatella. Like local girls won't even surf here. And I was just like, always hearing no. Even the women sometimes would say, no, it's too big for us. And I'm just like, oh no, the competitors, I don't even have competitors anymore. So I think sticking true to what you believe in is really important.
You ignored your self-talk, your whatever limiting beliefs were there trying to be put in you from other people. And you just followed your heart and switched that belief to, it is possible. It's not impossible, It is possible. I just have to stay committed, focused, and deal with it, right?
Totally. I think at this point I'm completely believe that anything is possible. As cliche as it sounds, I've seen it in the works. And like I was saying, I need to dream bigger because I'm so blessed to say that I've accomplished what I was dreaming of when I was a child. And at this point, I need to set the scale higher. And so, yeah, I'll let you know as soon as I figure out what that is and where it's going.
Wow, that was really, really, really nice, Shannon. Thank you so much for that. Like, you're real inspiration and very, very passionate. I admire that a lot about you. Like, I wish if a lot more people would be as passionate about their craft, what they do as you are. And I think a lot of people will benefit from this conversation and learn from how you did things and all the chapters that you went through, and the excitement and the joy that you're getting from empowering people, from being around empowered people, what you learn from them, the hard work that you're putting and determination and the focus that you have. And I think also a lot of compassion. You have a lot of compassion for people. I mean, you are out there covering, taking care of yourself, taking care of other people, dragging them out from their bed to party and celebrate. Yeah, that's really, really, really inspiring. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thanks so much for this opportunity. I think I also instilled a bit more understanding of why it is I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So why I'm sitting in cold Portugal when I could be in Bali. Like, I understand it now.